Are you thinking about becoming a foster parent or an adoptive parent? If so, this video is for you. This is going to be 5 things that I think every adoptive or foster parent needs to figure out before they begin the process. Hey there and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Katie and I typically make videos about foster care, adoption, but also general motherhood stuff and just some general lifestyle things. Like I do some vlogs, I sometimes share travels. So if any of that interests you, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and you can also click the bell notification so you won't miss any of my videos. To give you a little background, I am a foster/adoptive mother of 3 children. We adopted my youngest from foster care a couple of years ago, and we are currently in the process of adopting our 6-year-old and 10-year-old from foster care as well. They have been with us for about a year, and so we have kind of a variety of age ranges. We have been through this process before, and I also have a lot of friends who have been through this process, and so I've seen what is really important to know before you adopt and before you begin a foster care or adoption journey. Obviously, I could make a list of like 100 things you need to know before you adopt, but I'm gonna just start with 5 things today, make it really digestible for you so that you can walk away with some practical questions you can ask yourself as you go through this journey of figuring out what you are ready for if you are ready to begin fostering or adopting. I've decided to format this into 5 questions that you should ask yourself because I think this is a great way to kind of begin that conversation just with yourself or with your spouse about whether or not you are ready to do foster care or adoption. So my number 1 question, and I think this is very important, and any foster adoptive family you talk to will tell you this is an incredibly important part, is do you have a support system? Now, for a lot of people, their support system is going to look like family who lives nearby, whether it's your parents who will be the grandparents, your brothers and sisters, maybe you have aunts or uncles or cousins, people in your family who live near you who are really supportive and would be the types of people who you could rely on for different things. For other people like us, we do not live near our family, so our support system looks a little bit different. That's not to say that our families do not support us, because they support us in many ways, but it's also important to have those kind of local people who you can count on. In our situation, that looks like friends from our church and from our community, and so we kind of looked at, do we have people around us who are going to help us in these tough moments? You know the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child? Well, you might think that's really cheesy, but I do think that in the case of foster care and adoption, that is incredibly true. So when you are adopting or fostering, you're taking kids from a very broken situation, and it's going to be difficult. There are going to be a lot of things that are hard, especially when you're fostering. You are going to have court dates you're going to have to go to. There are going to be a lot of high emotions, a lot of things going on for you, for those kids, and it's going to be really important that you have people you can lean on emotionally. These are the types of people that you're going to be able to share your heart with. Things that when things are going tough with your kids or when you're just struggling emotionally, you have people you can lean on, and they're people that can kind of listen without judgment and try to understand what you're going through. So obviously, we all need people like that in our lives no matter what, but I do think it's very important that you can actually name those people. You know that you have people there that you will be able to talk to, that you'll feel comfortable talking to when those hard times do come. And then also on a practical side, you need to be able to have people in your life who can babysit. When you are especially doing foster care or even adopting from foster care in that first 6 months, you do have to have, usually the people who babysit need to be fingerprinted. And so that can actually be expensive for you to pay for all the fingerprinting, depending on the situation in the state, whether you're with an agency or with the county. All of that plays into it, but you need to find people who you can trust to watch your kids. And these are going to be people that you're going to have to make sure are trauma informed, that they can understand. They're the type of people who have patience with your children when they're having these really big emotions. And so you need to be able to also be able to name a few people that you know could help you with babysitting and people you would trust your kids with. And on top of that, do you have people in your life who are the types of people who would drop by and bring you some meals, or would drop by and help you clean your house or watch your kids for a couple minutes while you take a shower? That could be really great. So if you have a strong community, you're going to have a much easier time doing foster care and adoption because you will have support around you. You won't be completely doing everything on your own strength. The second question is a bit more practical, and this question is, can you provide financially for these children? Now, if you're doing foster care, yes, you will get a foster care stipend. And while you'll hear a lot of adoption and foster care YouTubers or content creators, they'll often say things like, oh, that amount is nothing, it barely even covers anything for those kids. I'm gonna disagree with that. I don't know if maybe those people are coming from a higher wealth bracket than I'm in, but as a teacher and we're a single income family, to me, the stipends are very helpful. Like, it's much more than we would need really to take care of the kids, and we provide things, they do activities, but you know, we live in a less expensive area of the country. We don't have this crazy fancy house that we have to pay for, but our kids do activities, they do all sorts of things. You know, we buy them clothes, we obviously have a bigger grocery budget now, so you do get that money, that extra help. However, I do not think you should be planning to rely on that. We think of that as extra additional money that can allow our kids to do extra things they would not normally be able to do on our salary alone. But the honest truth is that eventually once these kids are adopted, or at some point, you may not have that money anymore. You don't want to be in a place where you're relying on an adoption subsidy that you're kind of imagining in your head, or that you're relying on the foster care stipend to take care of your kids. You need to make sure that even if you had none of that, you could still care for these kids in an adequate way. Now, this doesn't mean you can't have any debt. Plenty of people have student debt, or maybe even some consumer debt. Maybe you have car payments or you have your house payment. That doesn't mean you can't adopt or foster. I would just say this. I don't think you should be under financial stress if you're going to be taking on children in your home, because that is going to add more stress. And if you are already financially stressed about things, maybe you have this huge amount of debt that you have no clue how you're ever going to pay off, and it stresses you out all the time. I don't know, to me, adding kids on top of that, maybe you need to sort that out first, figure out a plan first of how you're going to pay that off before you take foster or adopted children into your home, because you're just gonna have more stress in your life, and that might be too much for you to handle. So really try to get a handle on your finances. It doesn't have to be perfect. You do not have to be super wealthy to adopt children or to foster children, but you want to make sure you're at least stable. This next one is also a fairly practical thing to look at, but this question is, are you planning to stay put for several years? Now, what I mean by this is, are you planning on moving in the next year or so? In my opinion, if you are planning on moving, like you know your job's gonna change, or you wanna buy a different house, or you wanna buy a house instead of rent an apartment or whatever, if you think your housing situation is going to change, even if it's just across the neighborhood or across the town, I would personally recommend that you wait. Now, I don't want to say that if you have to move, it's impossible, you shouldn't adopt or do foster care right now, but I personally would say before you jump into the process, make sure you are somewhere pretty settled. A couple reasons for that. First of all, you are going to have to complete a home study in your training process, and part of the home study, some people think this is the whole thing, but it's really just a part, is the home inspection. And a caseworker is going to come to your house and they're going to make sure it's safe. They may check for fire safety things. We had to have our house inspected by like a firefighter. I don't know if it was the fire chief or fire marshal or whatever, but someone had to come and check our house. So if you move, you have to do all that over again, which is kind of a headache. In some cases, it may cost extra money if you have to move and have that redone, not positive, so you'd have to check with your agency, but it's just a hassle. In addition, if you are going to move, moving is very hard on kids who have been through trauma. I think moving is hard for any kid. I moved a few times growing up and it was hard for me. And I know it was hard for, other people as well who I know who moved several times. But imagine if you're a kid who has already been completely taken away from your birth family, possibly even from your birth country if you're adopted internationally, and you already have all this adjustment and all of this insecurity. You're with a new family and you're trying to get used to everything, and then all of a sudden your house is changing or where you live is changing. And maybe it's not even changing schools. Maybe you're just changing a house, but still for kids, that can be so difficult for them to have to uproot again and go to a new place. And I will say that, in full disclosure, my husband and I this past year were looking at houses, and our kids had been with us less than a year. And at first they were really excited, and then as it got like possibly more real, they were very like, I don't want to start over. And we were like, well, you're going to live actually closer to the school you go to. But I noticed how hard it was for them, and it made us kind of back off and be like, let's wait. The housing market's crazy right now anyway. Don't know if it is where you guys are, but we were just like, it's not worth it, because it was making them feel really nervous. It was making them feel unsettled, and that sense of safety and security is so important for these kids who are coming into your home. You're a stranger at first, so that will make them feel better if they know that they get to stay in that home for at least a year. That being said, I do know adoptive families who have moved not too long after kids moved into their home, and they knew what they were doing. It was for a good reason. They were maybe upgrading their house so that they could have more room for their kids to play, and it worked out, but it was just, you know, it can be a little more challenging. So just something to think about before you begin the process. So my next question is for people who are married and considering foster care and adoption, and that question is, how strong is your marriage? Now, I know that there are many single foster and adoptive parents out there, and I just want to say, I don't want to exclude you from this. Maybe the question for you would be, how confident do I feel in my abilities to parent these kids on my own? That's kind of the way I'd word it. But since I'm a married adoptive parent, I just want to talk to the married people really quick, because I think this is so important, is that if you're married, you need to have a good marriage. I would not recommend adopting if you have been married under a year. I would personally recommend that you've been married at least 2 years. I know that's not always possible for people, and especially if you got married older, that might not matter as much. Like if you were married at an older age, I got married at 22, so I was pretty young. I didn't know myself all the way, you know, we were still pretty young at the time, so we waited. But, you know, if you're getting married and you're in your late 30s, you're in your 40s, you may not have to wait as long, because you guys will both be more mature, you'll both know each other, you know, a little better, you'll know yourselves better, and so take that with a grain of salt. But I really think at least a year, so you can kind of figure out your marriage first, have a solid foundation before you begin this process. You also need to make sure that your communication skills are strong. Like, you need to be able to express your feelings and what you need to that person, and they need to be able to do the same to you. If you're really struggling with communication, you may want to consider working through that a little bit, maybe working with a therapist, maybe talking to a pastor at your church, finding some help with that before you begin the adoption process. Because I'm just going to tell you, adoption, foster care, and kids in general is not going to make your marriage easier. It's going to make it harder. I don't know anyone who had kids or adopted kids or fostered kids who said, man, you know what, when we did that, our marriage was so much easier afterwards. Like, no, it's not easier. Now, you'll grow a lot and you'll learn a lot, and it's worth it, but it's not easier. So please, please, if you do not hear anything else from this video, please hear this. If your marriage is struggling really badly, adoption and foster care will not fix it. It will not. Please do not use children in general, whether it's having biological children or adopting or fostering children, do not use that as a band-aid for your marriage. I actually know of a child who was adopted by a couple friends of ours, and before they came to live with him, he had been through, I believe, 2 failed adoptions, and the last one that he was in was a couple who was like on the verge of divorce and decided to adopt. And obviously, you know, their marriage crumbled, and then he had to suffer as a result of that because of their poor decisions. So please do not put a child in that situation. If your marriage is really struggling, get help with that first before you begin this process, please. And I would say this too, make sure that you and your spouse have a plan for how you are going to set boundaries, how you are going to give each other breaks when things get tough. Talk through the expectations that you have of the other person in that parenting role. Obviously, you'll have to figure out a lot as you go, but I think if you have those conversations ahead of time, it can really help before you just throw kids in and you're just like trying to figure it out on the fly. And last but not least, I think this is not talked about enough, but I think that before you decide to foster or adopt, you need to take a good look at your own mental health, spiritual health, emotional health. So you need to ask yourself, am I in a healthy enough place to care for kids who are coming from trauma? A lot of people who foster and adopt get caught up in this martyr syndrome where it's like, I'll do anything and I'll take any kid in any situation, and it doesn't matter how I feel, it matters how they feel. Well, I'm here to tell you that if you are not in a good place emotionally, spiritually, in regards to your mental health, etc., you are not going to be able to care for those kids in the way that they need to be cared for. I want to be clear that it's not that I'm saying if you have depression or if you have anxiety or if you had any other things like that, that you shouldn't foster adopt. That is not true. I am someone who struggles with anxiety. I go to therapy for it. And I still think that I am doing a great job as an adoptive mom. Now, some days I might not say that, but I think overall I've gotten a lot of affirmation from other people that I am doing a good job, but I'm also managing that a lot. I'm really working on managing it, and I'm aware of the struggles I have. And so I think you need to kind of ask yourself, where am I in regards to my mental health with my own emotions? How am I handling my own emotions? Because if your emotions are completely out of whack, you're gonna have these kids coming to you and their emotions are gonna be all over the place, and they need you to be regulated in order to help them learn how to regulate their own feelings. And that is very challenging no matter what, but especially if you're not really in a good place emotionally. I don't want anyone to walk away from this feeling like, oh, I have to be perfect. I have to have all this money and I have to already be living in the perfect house and I have to have the perfect marriage and I have to have the perfect mental health and no issues. That is not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying you need to kind of assess yourself. Don't just jump in with rose-colored glasses and think everything's gonna be amazing. I'm gonna have this kid and I'm gonna love them so much and it's just gonna be sunshine and roses. It's not gonna be that way. There are going to be struggles. So you need to be prepared and asking yourself these things and giving yourself honest answers before you begin the foster and adoption journey. I was hesitant to even make this at first because I know there are tons of people who say, I could never do that. I don't have what it takes to be a foster adoptive parent. And in my experience, most of the people who say that would probably make awesome foster and adoptive parents. They just don't think they could do it because they think you have to be perfect. Newsflash, I'm not perfect and I'm doing it. There are lots of other parents out there who are not perfect and we're doing it. And so you do not need to be the perfect parent, the perfect person in order to be a foster or adoptive parent. But I do want to also hit the other side of the aisle with the people who are just going into it thinking it's going to be amazing, thinking it's going to be easy and very natural, and not really thinking about, you know, am I ready for this? Do I have what it takes? Do I have the resources lined up to help me when this happens, when all these difficult times come? So it's really important to ask yourself those questions. If you found any of this helpful, will you please give this video a thumbs up? It really helps other potential foster and adoptive families find my videos, and it's my #1 goal that people who watch these videos are more prepared to begin their own foster and adoptive journey. Also, I'd love to hear in the comments if there's anything else, if you're a seasoned foster adoptive parent and you know some other questions that might be good to ask yourself, you can put those down in the comments. And I'd also be willing to hear any video ideas you have in the comments of things you'd like me to talk about. So that's all for today, but don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in any more foster care and adoption topics like this. I do post regularly and I have a lot of really great ideas in the pipeline. A lot of those ideas have come from you as the viewer, so thank you for your input. I'm really excited to share those with you throughout the summer. Anyway, I hope you're having a great week and I'll see you later.